All right. Good morning. You guys are already here. We're excited for this one, right? We're excited. Hello. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Stephanie Perry. I'm a year-round house sitter. I'm the creator of House Sitter School, and I help Black women take a sabbatical or move abroad on a budget. If that sounds interesting, make sure that you subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so that you will be notified when I post a new video or I go live with an amazing guest like we have today. So we're excited. If you're watching in the chat, say hi in the chat. If you're watching the replay, say hi in the replay. We have Jewel Pearson, who is Ms. Bohemian Soul, who is here today to talk about. She thinks, okay, so Jewel thinks she's here to talk about her tiny house. Really, she's here for me to pitch myself as a house sitter so that I can stay.
You just let me know when.
I just want to house sit. Okay, I just want to house sit in your tiny home. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. So a lot of you in the chat have already mentioned that you've already seen Jewel on HGTV. Today we want to talk about her experiences in the tiny house. We also want to talk about if we feel like this would be a good fit for a woman who is looking to transition to living at least part of the time out of the country, and we want to know if tiny home, if the whole experience is worth it. We want to know about minimalism and what about your stuff. Okay, so we're talking about all of that today. If you have questions, ask your questions in the chat. Welcome, Jewel.
Good morning. Thank you. Excited to be here.
Thank you. We're glad to talk to you. Can you introduce yourself to us, please?
Sure. My name is Jewel Pearson. On social media, I am known as Miss Bohemian Soul. I kind of started out as Miss Gypsy Soul and did a transition to reconnect with my roots. And I have lived in my tiny house for 6 years, 6.5 years almost, and built it in 2015. Just recently relocated to a farm. I'm right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, about 40 minutes east of Charlotte because the city of Charlotte kicked me out. They haven't figured out tiny houses. And I just recently added a new space to my tiny house and am settling in, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right. So good morning, everybody. I'm going to say hey to y'all. Hey, Rosanna from Waffle Cat. Hey, Rashida. Hey, Ludell. Good morning, Eleanor. I'm looking for my mom. You already know. Good morning, Angel. Good morning, Glenda. Good morning, AGL. Okay, so AGL's done some research and is going to have some serious questions. Good morning, Ms. Dow. Good morning, Esther. Hey, there we go. Good morning, Mom. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning,
Good
Coco.
morning, everybody.
Leah Venus. Hi, everybody. Okay, so don't assume that I'm going to get your question in. If you have a question, ask your question. If I don't see your question and I go past it, ask it again. I'm using a third-party platform, so we want to get some things answered today. Because last week we had Kathy Hampton. Kathy Hampton was our guest. Hey, Kathy. And she said that she'd actually talked to you, or she had a
Absolutely.
consultation with you about the tiny house movement. So tiny
She
houses
did.
are yeah, okay, let's get into it. So first, so you built your home in 2015. Can you tell us how you decided to build instead of buying like a trailer? My question is, how do you choose between a tiny house, a single wide trailer, a school bus, which is kind of my dream? Like, how did you decide on the tiny house option?
So living small is something that I always knew I wanted to do kind of when my daughter headed to kindergarten. As a single mom, I'd always said, once I was, and you're never done being the mother, but once she was grown and I could kind of focus more on myself, I wanted to live smaller and I wanted to travel. And I always said I also wanted to be irresponsible because as a single mom, I had to be so responsible. And so my thought was that I wanted to be able to just, make decisions based on desire versus requirements.
Yes.
And at that time, I always saw the dream as living in an RV and traveling the
Okay.
country.
Okay.
And then as she got older, I started, going to some of the RV shows and kind of looking into what that looked like. And the RVs that I liked, I realized, they were the cost of a house. And
Right.
so in order to live in an RV, I was still going to have to be very responsible to pay for that.
Okay.
And so just still trying to figure it out. And around 2013, I stumbled on a story of a woman who had built a tiny house on the trailer, like I built my house, and just kind of her background, why she had done it, resonated with me. And then the ability to still have home. So in RV, you can't necessarily make it home, as far as decor. So for me, there was the opportunity to live small, build a house, still have home, and still accomplish everything that I wanted to accomplish. And so that's kind of how I made the decision and the pivot to a tiny house. And when I built, schoolies weren't a big thing then. And I also, as far as like, why didn't I decide to do a mobile home or a single wide? Those are basically designed to remain in one place. And I like the thought of the mobility of a tiny house on wheels.
Great. All right. So you said that you had to move out of the city of Charlotte because they're not tiny house friendly.
Yeah, so the East Coast is kind of slow to the party of tiny houses. The West Coast is embracing them more. And so I feel like my connection is, and I'm in the country, so you all have to bear with me.
Yeah,
I
it's
feel like
okay.
my connection is a little fuzzy.
Okay. It'll get better.
So I was in someone's backyard in the city of Charlotte, like 10 minutes from Charlotte calls their downtown uptown. So I was like 10 minutes from uptown Charlotte. And the neighborhood started going through gentrification. And I had been there for 2 years. And as more and more people were buying into that neighborhood, then code enforcement and zoning would frequent the neighborhood. And so they saw my house, but at first they didn't even realize that it was on wheels. They thought the property owner had built an accessory dwelling unit and just hadn't done his proper permitting. So they cited him and said, you need to come and do the process the correct way. So then I was like, okay, so now I have to tell him it's on wheels. And so we went round and round for probably about 6 or 9 months with me trying to get them to understand tiny houses and get them to understand the opportunity for affordable housing. Like, I'm in this guy's backyard. Everybody in the neighborhood had huge backyards that, they're not doing anything with. So I'm helping him financially. And then, I had the living space. So some of them understood it. A lot of them understood it, but then it kind of went up to some higher ups and they shot it down. Zoning was for it. Building code enforcement was a lot of processes within building code enforcement in various cities and counties are antiquated.
Yes.
And so they couldn't get with it once it went to a higher up. So I had to move.
Okay. Was this the space that you were in? Was it rented through like a site, or is this just a person you knew who was like, sure, you can be here? Is there some sort
I
of
have
service?
I have found, so the location where I am now is a friend's property. And I found this location through, that connection, and he's allowed me to be out here on his farm. But all of my previous locations I found through Craigslist.
Oh,
And I put an ad out there. And so when I was putting my ad out there around, 2015, people thought I was crazy. Like, what is she talking about? And so it was a different process of explaining my house and what I needed. But now, everybody knows tiny houses. So, I would put my ad out on Craigslist and identify everything that I needed and what I was looking for. And then vet the people, really well, visit the property and see if it would be a fit for me, and then, kind of work out the details. And that's how I've had all of my success.
okay. Okay. So Rashida's question is my next
That's
question
me.
too. So does this mean that you are hooked up to when you're renting from someone in
Yeah.
Charlotte or like in Austin, and Adelia from Picky Girl Travels the World just said Houston. There's no rules in Houston. Seemed like there were no rules also in Austin when I visited, as in you saw in backyards, you saw
Right.
homes on wheels, you saw any kind of dwelling you can imagine, converted garages, anything. It seemed like they were like, sure, you can do it. It's your property.
So a lot of times, so building code enforcement and zoning aren't usually out just riding around looking for stuff. So a lot of times people are just doing it without permission. They're not asking.
Okay.
So you might think they're friendly, but if somebody reports you or something like that, then that's when you start getting into the challenges. But there are several areas, and it's on a city by city, a county by county basis. So it just depends. But as far as my utility hookups, so my house operates very much like an RV. So when I'm in someone's backyard, I am connecting to, for my house, I need power, water, and I don't need sewage. So I am connecting to that home's utility. And one of the things that I bring to the table as a perk is that, I have a certified electrician. I'm going to have my electrician come in and do the work so that I can make the homeowner feel comfortable that, I'm trying to be responsible. And because my house is on the larger side, when I go to a location, it's my intent to be there at least for a couple of years. So when I'm going in and doing I'm running my, electricity under the ground. I'm trenching my lines, my water lines under the ground so that, I don't have the freeze issue. And then also, so it's a couple of reasons. I don't want to have the freeze issue. I also don't want to alert somebody with, lines running through the yard that something else is going on here. So just like the city couldn't figure out what my house was back there, I didn't have any telltale signs. Some people will run, an electrical cord, and it's not, your Walmart cord. It's a cord specifically, yes, for this. But I'm connecting to that homeowners because once I have to involve the city and say, hey, can I get some power here? Then they're going to shoot it down.
Right. And then that person's rent or the rent you pay that person includes all of those things.
Yes. So when I first started out, I was in an RV park. And so in the RV park, I had a dedicated power pole. And so I knew from being there for like 9 months what my cost for electricity was. So I kind of go in and say to the homeowner, I usually use this much, of electricity, and then give them some time, like over 3 or 4 months to compare their bill to, what the increase, and then that's my piece. But I usually know what it is. And yes, you can definitely be off grid and use solar. So my intent was at some point to have solar. Solar is expensive to install, and it just has never really been in the budget, even though as many times as I've moved and put in infrastructure, I could have afforded it by now. But it's just that initial outlay, I didn't install solar.
Okay. All right. Now, you said you don't use sewage, so you have a toilet that's kind of like a composting. It flushes, but it composts. Am I right?
So I don't have a composting toilet. So a composting toilet, you're not flushing it. It's the waste is going into a container where it's composting. But I do have a flush toilet. I have a macerating toilet, which is generally used in houses like in a basement situation where you want to expand your basement, but you don't want to tie into, dig into the ground to get into the plumbing lines because that's expensive. So this macerating toilet, you flush it, it grinds up the waste, and then it has a pump in it. And so with that pump, you can connect it into, I have mine connected into a tank that's a couple of tanks in the backyard.
Okay.
And so it pushes the waste out to that tank. And then every so often, every about 3 or 4 months, I have, a service come out and pump those tanks out just like a porta potty.
Great. Okay. But better than an RV because you don't have to do it yourself, right? That's it.
I don't have to do it myself. And so it's 2 great big tanks. And so it could be a positive or a negative. So that means when I go to set up at a location, I've got to get all of this set back up, which is, a potential expense. Right. But for me, it's worth it because I don't move my house often. So once I get it, set up, then that infrastructure is in place.
Okay. Speaking of not moving your house often, so you're in the tiny house so that you can be irresponsible. Did you have? But then when you moved, you stayed in the Charlotte area. Did you ever think like I want to go to the desert for 6 months, or did you ever think about, or 2 years even? Did you ever think about going someplace else for a while?
So for me, initially, I really don't have a concept of I won't say space, but in my head, when I was thinking that I was building my tiny house, I was thinking that I would move with it more. Mm-hmm. But then as I started building, I'm thinking, you're building a 28-foot house. Okay. You can't move it as much as, as an 18-foot house 20-foot house max, but 18 and below are the ones that that people can move,
Okay.
themselves and frequently. My house, like I said, I generally will stay in place a couple of years, but for me, it still allows me to physically travel. So I
Yeah.
have my tiny house as my home base, and I can still go somewhere and stay for a couple of months because my expenses, would allow that. So for me, it became less about moving my house to travel, just allowing me the opportunity to travel.
Yes, a lot of women here want to talk about having a home base so that they can be irresponsible and bop around the globe, right? Which I'm all
Absolutely.
in. I'm all
Absolutely.
in on. I don't have. Well, I guess my home base is a room in my parents' house, and some people want something that is their own. So
Right. Right.
can we talk a little bit about the difference, the money difference, and how, like, the difference in having a tiny home and your previous life in a not tiny home, and how that allows for more travel or for more freedom.
Absolutely. So I've just moved back into my house the end
Yeah.
of May after so once the city of Charlotte kicked me out, I went to a farm, another farm outside of Charlotte, and it was not a good experience because, and we'll talk about this. I had some problems with racism in that area where
Mhm.
my house was more visible. I had some problems where people were coming onto the property. And so it became a very uncomfortable and often dangerous situation for me. So until I found this location, until my friend allowed me to put my house on this location, um, I moved and got an apartment just so I could feel comfortable and safe. And so a year's lease of paying Charlotte uptown rent, and I'm back into that race of what rent looks like close
Yeah.
to downtown.
Yeah.
And so if I consider, and so my thing was, I've got to find a location so I can get back in my house
Mhm.
because I pay what I consider tiny house parking. I bring my house to a location and I pay that person to allow me to park on their house,
Yeah.
and on their property.
Yes.
And so I have paid anywhere from like $350 to $500 so far
Oh,
in parking of my house. So I've got my house and I'm paying, $300 or $500. I haven't paid those amounts, you know, I don't even think when I first got an apartment. I think I was paying
yeah.
550 when I first got an apartment
Okay.
many, many years ago. So my parking for my tiny house is a fraction of what I would pay, for a mortgage or for an apartment rent. And so for me, that is, one of the bigger differences. And I have all the amenities of a house.
Mhm.
I'm
And you,
just not paying that expense.
yes, and you paid for your house outright. You had it built,
I did.
and so there's no cost. Yeah.
I
Okay.
did. So when I built in 2015, there was not the opportunity for a tiny house loan. There are some
Mhm.
companies that offer loans for tiny houses now. They're very limited companies, but there are some. You can also get a loan if you build with an RVIA certified builder. So that's a builder that's certified to build RVs.
Okay.
And so you then could get an RV loan through, certain banks. So there's a lot more opportunity now. But when I built, yes, it was savings. It was, money from working. The end, as my funds ran out, it was a personal loan and loans from friends to get this done. Um, but it was an out of pocket expense, and my house probably at when I built in 2015 probably cost me about $85,000, and it's now it's paid for, and that I don't
Yeah.
have a mortgage on it.
Uh-huh. Great. Okay, so I'm excited to hear that your rent, your not your you don't call it rent, that your tiny house
Tiny house
parking,
parking, it's
tiny
the
house
same thing.
parking.
I
I'm
always call them I say my PO. I pay my rent to my PO, and I say property owner. My friends is like, that sounds like
your
you've got a parole
parole
officer.
officer. Okay, that's a good price. I know in Delaware, I'm from Delaware. In
Hmm.
Delaware, in the early 2000s, maybe the 90s or 2000s, a single wide trailer lot rent was over $1,000 a month.
Yes,
Yes, so
yes.
I'm excited. I'm glad to hear that.
Depending on location. So if I've been fortunate, even when I was within the city of Charlotte, I still wasn't paying a lot of rent, but I'm looking at some of the tiny houses, as people are renting them out now, and building them just to rent out. And I saw one, I think it was in Portland the other day, and it was $1,100. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, I know it's based on location, but
Mhm.
that's a lot of money.
Okay. So that $350 to $500 a month means that you are free to move about the country. When
I am free to move about the country. And that's why I was like, I have got to get back into my tiny house. And so now there were two things that happened. So after I built my house, what I, there was the recoup period, especially after, the
Mhm.
outlay of about 85,000.
Yeah.
So it took me about a year, to get back financially
Yes.
together. And I felt like at the time I was kind of feeling like I was failing, because at the end of my tiny house building, there was a timeline with being on HGTV and things had to happen. And then once I gotten it done, I was tapped out. And I remember I still hadn't bought AC for my tiny house. And I remember sitting in my house like the month of June because I was just financially tapped out. There was no more money and I didn't have any AC. And I swear I was hallucinating because it was so hot. But in looking back, I'm like, okay, so that was making my dream happen
Yeah.
and getting through it and you'll be okay. And so I kind of feel like that's where I am again, because moving out to this farm, there was the infrastructure costs again, plumbing, my electricity. I built my house, this addition. And so it's again getting my money back together. But then I know again, I'll be okay.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I've done that. I saved to travel for a year. I saved $14,000 to travel for a year. I blew all of it, right? I went through, talk about being irresponsible. I went through all of that. I enjoyed myself, right? That was a
Right,
wonderful year. Came back with 30 something dollars, and then I'm like, I can't do anything. I can't go anywhere.
right.
It's time to get some more money.
Gotta recoup.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So 11:59, you know exactly how to catch my attention. So I'm going to ask you a question because you started. Thank you very much for that compliment. We look beautiful. We all do. Thank you. Right. So what about insurance? So how are you if yeah, how are we insured in our tiny home?
So I know of two companies that are offering tiny house insurance right now.
Okay.
The standard insurers, I've got my auto insurance through Geico. They won't offer. I just asked them again recently, and they don't offer tiny house insurance right now. But there are a company that offer tiny house insurance.
Okay.
That's happened within the last, I'm going to say, 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
But when I initially built my house, the rule of thought, or the thought then was, um, just start, saving your money. So if something
Right.
happened, because you're not kicking out so much for a rental or a mortgage, then save your money so that if something happens, then you're able to fix it yourself. But now there are companies that offer tiny house insurance.
Yes, you can act as your own insurance.
Right.
That's kind of my healthcare plan, right?
Yeah.
You keep the
Yeah.
cash when I'm abroad, where in places where I can afford to pay out of pocket, right? Just
Yeah.
make sure that you have the cash so that if something
Yeah,
happens.
because sometimes, especially with house insurance, even when I owned a traditional house, you pay all of that money each month. And then sometimes, and when you need to use it, sometimes they screw you over because
Yeah,
it's like, that's not covered. And it's like, I've been paying this insurance for 20 years. What do you mean this isn't covered? And if I had kept that 20 years of insurance
right.
money,
I
that payments, I could
that's
have covered it myself.
that's
So it
right. That's
yeah.
right. Thanks for that super chat, Kathy. We're going to give Jewel all super chat today. Super chat is where YouTube lets people give you cash, right? Uh,
Oh, thank you, Kathy. And
so
I owe you an email. I saw your message. I'm coming, honey. I promise. Thank
Kathy,
you.
Kathy told us last week that she wants to do a tour, and I believe you do tours. So I'm going to drop the
I
link to
do.
the website.
Yes, I owe Kathy a tour. She did a consult with me, and part of the consult is a tour. Even so, so I'm kind of moving into virtual tours with everything that's going on. But Kathy booked before I moved to virtual tours. So absolutely.
Okay, so you can book a consultation with Jewel or a virtual tour with her at MsBohemianSoul.com. If you're watching the replay,
Absolutely.
that's in the description. Here, you see that right here in the chat. So You can book a consultation. I see you guys are all in on this. So I didn't know that we were that into, I thought this was a me thing. You know how you think you're into something and you're like, that's because maybe I'm a little bit weird, like you feel like, but then you find out when you open your mouth and say a thing, you find out how many other people are into
Right,
it. And so
right.
maybe, yeah, so I'm glad that we're
Especially
here.
now in 2021, but when I was talking about tiny houses in
Right.
2013, and I was like, I'm building a tiny house, and people were looking at me like she's weird. I had people say, well, are you experiencing a hardship? Do you need somewhere to stay? And it's
Yeah,
like, no, I got a whole plan. You all just don't understand tiny houses right now, but I got a whole plan.
that's right. Yes. Yes, that's right. We hear that, right? Are you having a breakdown? Is she having a
Exactly.
breakdown?
Exactly. When they don't understand, it's like they want to assign something's wrong with her. And it's like, no, I'm just fine.
But then the people who question you a couple years later are the ones who are like, know exactly
Absolutely.
how.
Absolutely.
I need to tell
Absolutely.
me. Yes.
Yeah. Can I come visit your house? I'm
Mhm.
considering building tiny houses now. That's going to be a no.
Okay. So let's talk a quick second about your builder. Was this, did you just ask around and find somebody to build, or did you already know
So
him?
my builder was through a referral from some friends that I've had for a number of years.
Good.
When I was building in around that time, I met with, I was really trying to work with a Black builder.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes we're slower to the party. I met with a couple of people who were like, you can't do that. You can't build a house on a trailer. And I was like, yeah, you can.
Mhm.
Um, so I ran into that a couple of times, and then some friends connected me with a relative of theirs. Unfortunately, and because at the time, like I'd been researching almost 2 years and realized that this was, something in my mind that I felt like was coming. And then as I connected and got the opportunity that we were going to be on HGTV, I felt like that was also going to give us a lot of visibility into a movement that was seen as a totally white young hipster movement. And being on HGTV, where you don't see a lot of people, as I'm now saying, people of the global majority instead of people of color, people of the global majority,
Okay.
there was an opportunity for us there too. And so I kept saying that to my crew. It's like, let's step up our game, make ourselves visible, because this is going to be an opportunity. Unfortunately, my builder and I did not work well together at all. Just a number of reasons.
Okay.
And so we weren't able to move forward after that. The bonus for me, one of the things I felt like, so building in 2015, and building on a trailer, like my house is built on what you might consider a utility trailer. So if you see somebody out getting ready to go cut grass and they've got their lawn equipment on this trailer, that's the similar type trailer that my house is built on. It's 28 feet by almost 9 feet wide, but it's built specifically for a tiny house. And to build on a trailer like that requires something, a skill set that's a little bit different from a house build, because you're building on a foundation. Also, building to such a small scale, the inches actually matter. In building a large house, I know builders have the opportunity to kind of make a mistake and then you can cover it up. But in a tiny house, if you make a mistake and you're off a couple of inches, then things are out of whack. Especially as far like I knew I needed this amount of space for my couch, etc. So
Right.
you've got to really pay attention to the detail. And I think a lot of what was going on, I know a lot of what was going on was overwhelming. It was it's
Yeah.
something new. It was overwhelming to me. I felt like it was overwhelming to him. And I think the way that played out just didn't work out
Okay.
well for us together. But I had the bonus of being able to be on site every day, all day. And because I had I researched, 2 years almost, and designed my own tiny house plans. Like I knew my house inside and out. And I did all of the sourcing of the material. So being on site, I was able to make sure things are being done correctly. And so, on the back end of it, my house, was just fine with the ability to be on site and make sure everything was going to work out okay.
What's your work background that you were able to do the house plan?
So my sister is an interior designer, and I sketched from my research. I sketched it out on some graph paper, and then she worked with me from there to put it to actual bill plans.
Okay, you're not an architect, is what you're
No,
saying?
not at all. Not at all. Not at all. I just
Okay,
make stuff up. So
wow.
this new addition that I built, definitely everybody keeps saying you've got to have some architectural skill. I don't. I just kind of figure stuff out.
Okay,
So yeah, thank you.
wonderful. Yeah, okay, so I saw a couple of questions about can we see the house? Listen, I am not technologically set up
I wondered about
the way my technology skills are set up. I can't show you, okay? But you can go to Jewel's Instagram, Ms. Bohemian Soul, and see her beautiful home, which was recently. So it was we saw it on HTTV. It's amazingly beautiful, and then she took it to another level. She just has done a renovation and some new stuff. So check her out. Check her out on Instagram. You can click on right now. Click that link wherever I left.
that. And I will be doing a photo shoot soon of this new space, so I'll have some updated photos out there as well.
Okay, great. And so Marley, yes, because Jules, hi Marley, because her home is on a trailer. It's she just moved it, right? So check her out on Instagram if you want to see how that's done. She did tell us that because hers is a little wider than the normal tiny homes, or wider than average.
Longer than what I would. So when you see people moving their own tiny houses and they're traveling with it, they usually have like an 18-foot tiny house or maybe a 20 max where they can manage it themselves.
Okay.
Because my house is 28 feet long, when I move my house, I hire a tow service to do that just because of that. So I wouldn't try to move my house on my own. But yes, I could, if I want to move my house, I would hire a tiny house driver, and it would be on the way. So thank you, Doreen.
Hi, Doreen.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
the super chat. Doreen says she's so happy to be here. We're glad that you're here, Doreen.
Thank you very
Says,
much.
I remember the first time I saw you and became hooked on tiny homes. Me too. Me too. Jewel is an ambassador. She's speaking. She's an ambassador. Yes. Well, the when I announced that we were
Hey,
talking about this
Joe.
last week, people were like, "Yeah, I already know. We are. You don't have to tell us who Jewel is. We know. We'll be there."
I appreciate that.
Hi, Joanne. Thanks very much for the
Hey,
super.
Joe.
Hi. Where are you, Joe?
Thank
Are you
you.
in the U.S.? Joe is all over the globe. I know Joe
Exactly.
from a trip that she took to, I'm gonna say Rwanda, but it might have been Uganda with the gorillas. And ever since then, I've been like, I gotta get there. All right, and thanks, Joan. Hi, Jewel. I met you years ago when I lived in Charlotte, and I was interested in building a tiny house. It's awesome to see you again. Hi.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thanks, friends, for the super chat. Joe wins. Support Black women. Keep it up. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, and again, super chats going to Jewel. We appreciate your time and coming in and talking to us. And most importantly, we appreciate you letting us know that this is for us. So you spoke
Oh,
about,
absolutely.
your experience with racism on a place that you had parked parked your tiny house. How I guess it's going to vary by location, or maybe not, because racism is all over. But how 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 intrusive are people into your business, and how much extra of that is because you're a Black woman? Is it possible to measure that?
I don't know. When I first interestingly enough, when I first jumped into this, I didn't even, for whatever reason, I hadn't even factored in the racism piece of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And then my first location, I was in an RV park, and I probably hadn't even been there a good 3 weeks or so, and could hear a conversation that was happening. And they were intent on using the N word, and they were using it loudly, and I knew it was for my benefit.
Mhm.
And then it kind of hit me. Okay, so you're doing something that's out of the norm. You're in predominantly white spaces. That's going to be something that you have to expect, and I wouldn't have done anything different.
Okay.
I just knew I hadn't intended to live in an RV park long term. But and then the racism that happened, a few years ago, somebody even eventually got arrested after I had gone. Somebody got arrested dealing with somebody else out there, and it got escalated. The problems got escalated because tiny houses right now because until cities are able to deal with tiny houses, the most accessible areas for them are going to be RV parks or rural areas. And we already know that those aren't always the safest spaces for people of color, people of the global majority, Black people. And so it became one of the things, and it wasn't something that I had on my radar, that I needed to start sharing my journey so that people could understand. Because when I went into this movement, my expectation, because we were doing something different, we were doing something innovative, and we wanted the tiny house movement. When I'm saying we wanted the country to recognize tiny houses as a viable option for community. And so as part of that, my assumption was that we would be rebuilding community and building community the right way. There's no sense in rebuilding community the same way it's been existing, just in smaller homes. So with my counterparts, I started sharing my experience, because that's also been my experience as I go to some of the tiny house events. The tiny house events happen in rural areas as well. And so I've run into incidences of racism attending as a speaker at a tiny house event. I run into, run into incidents of racism. I was sharing this with my counterparts because if we're building community and we are rebuilding community, then that's something that needs to be recognized. And how do we deal with that? And that becomes something that's important. But then I realized my counterparts weren't really interested in hearing that conversation. They just were, kind of still okay with the status quo. We're just going to build community with these smaller houses. So it became something that became more of my mission in sharing my story, in making us aware of it, because I don't want us to not participate in the movement, but I want us to be fully aware of what is the potential to happen. I also wanted to share my story because, interestingly enough, I've heard from people in our community who have said, you're kind of doing what the white man wants us to do and not pursue home ownership, traditional home ownership. And that's exactly not what I'm doing. I've never said don't buy a traditional house, but when you look at the numbers for home ownership year after year, we statistically remain at the bottom of the list on the percentages of home ownership. And what I know is, the American dream of buying a house built, is not necessarily the dream that was built for us. And so for me, tiny houses offer an opportunity to get to home ownership quicker because you're not going into that 15-30 year mortgage. You're not necessarily dealing with the redlining. That process isn't necessarily set up for us to work well. And so I also know that in addition to us statistically remaining at the bottom of the numbers for home ownership, we do own property. But we're losing that property. If you know about heirs' rights, and if we have farmland, but year after year, the percentages of Black farmers, those numbers are dwindling. So I wanted to share my story because in building community, one of the things that I have been trying to get people to consider is, if you have property and you don't necessarily know what to do with it, why not consider a tiny house community? That doesn't mean you're selling your property, because if the homes are on wheels, like my house is on wheels, then they're renting that parking spot. It's not there that you're selling property and they will permanently be there. So that's a different type conversation, building community with movable homes and maybe movable businesses, or for farmers who have property and are, they get into tax problems, and then somebody comes and takes their property. If they were able to open their property to tiny houses and offer a tiny house community opportunity, then those people can then provide some income for that farmer, and then maybe even some physical help there on the farm. And in doing so, especially if that it's a Black farmer and that's open community for Black people, then that has created a safe space for a tiny house owner, and then it's created some help for that, that farmer. And it's kind of like the situation where I am now. I'm in a safe space. This is a Black farm.
Oh,
Where I am is a Black farm, and I'm in a it's a huge farm, but it's fenced in. I feel safe in this property, on this property. And so that's the conversation that kind of developed for me in dealing with racism and not actually seeing that coming. Then it became, a responsibility for me to be more of an advocate in a different way.
are you on? You don't happen to be on Green Heifer Farms, are you? Do you know a Farmer
No.
C? Okay, Farmer C is a Black woman farmer in North Carolina, Cary, North Carolina, I think. I don't know where that is.
Okay. Yeah, up near Raleigh. Cary is up near
Oh,
Raleigh.
okay.
I'm right outside of Charlotte.
Okay, just wondered. Okay, all right. So what? So I love the idea that Black farmers, that we can partner with Black farmers to create these communities. Do you know of a place where we can find a listing? Is this still something that is not? Is there a place where we can go and find farmers who have space for us?
So if you go to you shared my page, and on it's so I'm all tongue tied. So I have another page, Tiny House Trailblazers, Miss Bohemian Soul, and Tiny House Trailblazers. And within Tiny House Trailblazers, when I first got into this movement and didn't realize I didn't see anyone that looked like me, there was a couple of other Black women that I was able to connect with. I still work with one, Dominique Moody, and I created Tiny House Trailblazers to kind of talk about the work that we're doing. And so if you follow me on social media, it's Instagram, either Miss Bohemian Soul or Tiny House Trailblazers. Within my bio, there's a link that I have within the bio where I am trying to make the connection between tiny house farmers and people who are interested, who own a tiny house or intend to own a tiny house, so that I can, identify where these farmers are and where these people are and make those connections. So that is something I'm working on. And I'm also working on an initiative that's called Recommune that is just developing, where I want to build community and do that work.
Wonderful.
So I'm trying to put it together.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. We talked to women who we've talked on this channel to a couple of women who have gone out of the U.S. to create community because they just felt like it was hopeless here, right? Do you have hope that we're going to? Black farmers have always been. It's nothing new. Black farmers are being targeted by the government, by other
Absolutely.
farmers
Absolutely.
to continue to steal from them. Do you feel hopeful that this is going to? I guess you have to feel hopeful if you're doing it.
I feel hopeful. I feel sometimes I feel like the tide is turning. Sometimes you wake up and you're just like, oh my God, we're not making any progress. But I feel hopeful in that we can build our own community and make some things happen.
I'm so glad. Okay, I'm glad to
Yes,
hear
I have a tiny house matchmaking service. I didn't think about it that way, but that's exactly what I'm doing, matchmaking.
this cat from Rebloom Room. Yes, I love it. I love it. Yeah, because I am more pessimistic about things happening in the U.S. until I hear from people like you. So we have to keep things a little quiet. I just saw the information. I just saw Martina say, "Don't tell her location." Right. So we have to. We feel like we have to do a lot to keep things quiet. So I'm so glad to hear about what you.
Yes, and I will say I'm outside of Charlotte, and I do keep my location quiet, like just because I never know where the man is, and I'm not really trying to tell the man all of my business, but I am outside of Charlotte. I'm very cautious and careful about who I invite into my space in my home, and I know you all understand all of that.
Yes.
And I did have to. I've always been cautious about who I invited my home, but I also know that opportunities for me look a lot different from a lot of my counterparts, where they don't run into the same issues that I run into, and so I have become a lot more cautious about my sharing.
Yeah, you talked about the how the tiny house movement was being the face of the tiny house movement was the young white hipster. Even though this is a concept that was taken from us, right? This is something that we've done.
Absolutely, and it's one of the things. So, the white hipster movement, and of course that's, by design, but that's one of the things that I've always shared with them, and it's one of the reasons that I feel like we've not really embraced tiny houses,
Mm,
um, because we're not that far removed from tiny houses, and tiny
mhm.
houses, living in them not by choice.
By necessity, yeah.
We've had to live in them. So sometimes when I talk about, and it's one of the reasons that I actually started sharing my house and my pictures of my house on social media, because when I first joined the movement, in some of the houses that I'd seen, I was like, I don't want to live in that. That sounds like Laura Ingalls' Little House on the Prairie, and a whole lot of work. I'm not trying to be out pumping the well and doing all of that.
Yeah,
After having lived in some very nice spaces, I'm not trying to feel like I'm going backward.
that's right.
And for us, when we, maybe our grandmother, or, we're a couple of generations removed from
Mhm.
living in a tiny house where you're using the outhouse, and a
Mhm.
lot of people compare a compost toilet to an outhouse.
Mhm.
So you're going out, to get your water. So that concept is for people who haven't had, and our communities often hasn't had. It's a hard sell to say, yeah, look at this tiny house, and it's like, no, that's not what I want to do.
I want
And
comfort.
so that's why and my tagline is, you don't have to give up luxury to go tiny,
Yeah.
because I for me, my house is my retirement plan, and so I wanted to have everything in my house that I've been accustomed to. So I have a,
Mhm.
washer dryer combo unit, lots of windows. I have a walk-in closet. I didn't want to feel like I was giving up things to go into a tiny house, and that's the story that I'm trying to share with our community, to say, hey, it doesn't have to look like, the Laura, a lot of work. It can be something, that is good.
I want to talk a lot about luxury and how your space is so just so beautiful. Okay, so I want to talk about that, but I do want to answer Adelia's question. So if a landowner wants to begin a tiny house community, what do they need to know? This is a long
That's a broad
conversation.
question. So
I know.
as I think of tiny house community, an ideal tiny house community in my mind is going to be accommodating. So not everyone's house is going to have the luxury that my tiny house has. So in a community, I've always considered having a community with kind of a base. So you have like your base, kind of think of it like, if you go into, an apartment complex that, I've lost my word, the community center, that's what it
Yes.
is.
Yes.
So the community center, where if somebody wants to come into your community and they don't have a washer dryer, in their tiny house, or they don't have the large kitchen,
Okay.
this community center looks like a place where maybe you've got washer dryers, you've got, a bathroom shower, a couple of bathroom showers, and
Okay.
you've got an open space where people can gather, because again, people are trying to build community. So your community is built around this space, and you just allow people to bring their tiny houses in. And so then you have, kind of your standard parking pad where, they can park the tiny houses. They have access to power and water if they need it. Again, some people will have solar, they won't need that, but you kind of are building the community so that people, of at all levels with their tiny houses can come in.
Great. All right. Thank you very
I hope
much.
that I hope that helped answer some of that.
Thank you. So we are going to, if you are interested in this concept from one direction or the other, go to Tiny House Trailblaze. Am I saying it right? Tiny House Trailblaze.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Go to, this is where Jewel and her collaborators, her partners are giving information on this exact thing, on being, participating in a tiny house community or
Community.
creating
Mhm.
a community of your own. I love this idea. Okay. All right, so let's go. Okay, so I'm sorry, y'all. I can't show you pictures of her beautiful home. Just go to Instagram and look. Click on the link, right? You can click on it right now. Okay, you won't leave us. Go look at the beautiful home. So let's talk about this. So you decide that you're going to go tiny, right? You're going to go
Mhm.
into a tiny home, but you know who you are, and you know that
Absolutely.
you want nice things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what is
Um,
the? So what is the what were um
my
well, I
requirements?
guess, would you consider yourself a minimalist? You don't, I don't
No.
wouldn't say that.
No, I've never said I was a minimalist. I wanted to live smaller, and because I say I'm not a minimalist, that's why I have a walk-in closet. When I was researching again, so the luxury tiny houses that you now see, there's tiny house luxury. There are luxury tiny houses out there that did not exist when I built my house in 2015. And so my counterparts, they were talking about, well, I've got 4 shirts and 3 pairs of
I know.
pants, and and their storage, they build their couch in the house, and they their clothes in the couch. And for me, I still work, I still engage, in life. And I was thinking, that's not how I want to live. I'm not going to have 3 shirts and 4 pairs of pants. And
One fork.
so part of my right. And I've heard everybody say that it's 4 people in that house, so we have 4 cups. And I'm thinking, no, that works for them, but that doesn't work for me. That, to me, that was just a concept that, in my opinion, I always say to people, that for me would be stepping backward, and that's not what I was interested in doing. And so in my design of my house, I wanted to have a walk-in closet. I know I need sunshine, so I wanted to have a lot of windows. Again, for me, knowing that my tiny house is my retirement plan, I knew it had to be built so that it would be sustainable for me for long term. And but obviously I can't have but so much in this house. So I have pared down my belongings. I also feel like over the years it has, where I wouldn't say I was as much environmentally conscious in the beginning. Now I'm more environmentally conscious. My gray water. What am I doing to the environment? What is my impact to the environment?
Right.
If I do shop and bring something in, obviously I have a small space, so I'm trying to figure out, can I donate something, or can I pay this forward? How do I give this another life somewhere else? And so I'm still not a minimalist, but it has changed my way of thinking and the way I live, in trying to be more conscious. One of your questions you were asking me was like, how is my routine different? I'm out in so I don't feel like morning routine is necessarily different from a standard house. I still have everything that a standard house has, but being in the middle of this farm, and I'm just surrounded by, farmland, trees, and nature. It has required me to, what one of my posts I said, think about doing and being better. What am I eating? What am I drinking? What am I embracing in my spirit? And just trying to be better, physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially, all of those things, because I'm now able to focus more on that. And I'm surrounded by that. So it is a mindset change. It's not just about building a house. And that's one of the things I started talking about in my workshops when I first launched them. It's not just about building a physical structure. It's also about a change within you.
Yes. So how hard was it to pare down? How hard was it to, even though
So
you want this, you want the tiny house life, but it means you have to give up a lot.
So for me, so I started this journey 10 years before I actually built my house. When my daughter went to undergrad, that was 2005, and I built my house in 2015. So as she was leaving the house, I was downsizing. So we lived in a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house in Atlanta. And so when she left to go to undergrad, and she went to North Carolina Central, HBCU in Durham, I was having mommy anxiety. So I moved. That's when I moved back to Charlotte to kind of be closer to her. And so when I moved, I sold my house, and then I moved into a smaller space. And then kind of over the course of those 10 years, I just kept moving into smaller spaces. For me, it really didn't make sense. So my 4-bedroom, 3-bath house. So you have your guest bedroom and you have your guest bathroom, and you're paying for all of that. And then I'm thinking, well, how often do I have guests?
Right.
And I'm cleaning all of this space. How often is it used?
Uh-huh.
And then as I started downsizing, and I was still for a long time hold on to that extra bedroom and the extra guest bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, this doesn't make much sense because I'm not really utilizing it. So I had gotten down to a 1 bedroom, 1 bath
Okay.
but before I built my tiny house. And because the other thing is, once you start thinking about the things that you have, clothing, shoes, and I saw somebody say, I can't give up my clothes. I didn't give up my clothes, but I did pare it down to what am I actually wearing? Because when you think about it, you're not wearing your entire closet full
No.
of clothes. And so when you think about it, it's like, why am I, and, you do your switch over from summer to winter and you put all these clothes back in the closet. How much of that stuff do you actually wear? And so when you think about that and the things that you can let go, it becomes, an easier process. So I did have the luxury of 10 years to pare my stuff down. But a very good friend of mine, Christine Platt, the Afro minimalist,
Yes.
she, for somebody that's considering it, she just wrote a book, and I had the opportunity to participate in writing that book. She goes through the process of not writing the book, but I had a piece within the book. Let me clarify that. But she goes through the process, and she goes through the history of why we feel an attachment to stuff, even from the Black history perspective, and then going through letting some of that stuff go. It's not easy, but it's it and she and I had a conversation. One of her things, less is liberation. And that came out of a conversation that she and I had. And she was talking to me about my tiny house. Less for me is freedom. And that's where she came up with the less is liberation. I don't have so much stuff where, it's overwhelming. I can tell you everything. I know everything that I have because I've got it. And it's a weight, like a weight off your shoulders. When I was first selling my house in Georgia, I filled up a 2-car garage with stuff that I was just basically throwing away. Because over the time of living in that house, there's stuff in your attic that you put up in the attic that you never see again. Boxes and closets where it's stuff that you put in a box and you feel like you're going to need it later. And then you realize 10 years later, I don't need anything in that box. And so that was the kind of stuff that I was getting rid of. And that's kind of a weight off your shoulder.
It is. It is. I've done this in stages as well. So I left to go traveling full time. I left with a huge bag. By the time I came home, I had a small bag. Like, even when you think, you talked about, like, am I wearing these clothes, right? How many
Right.
clothes do I have? I'm not even wearing these clothes. When I looked back in my suitcase, I was like, why do I have these things? I'm never
Exactly.
going to wear this. I'm packing things for just in case. And so
Yes.
it's even when you think you're paring down, you find, like, oh, maybe there's another level. Maybe I can go
Right. Right.
a little bit
And
further.
that just becomes like a second nature to you in this environment, because it's like, you have, and for me, part of it. So in 2007, I ended up in the hospital for I was in the hospital for 6 days. I had blood clots in my lungs. It was 2 weeks before my birthday, had no idea how close to death I was. And at that time, I lived a life where I had the fancy clothes. If I'm gonna go somewhere nice, these are the fancy clothes that I would wear. Or you have the fancy dishes. If I have guests, these are the dishes and the the glasses that I use. And those 6 days of realizing, so I've got all this stuff over here that I'm waiting for the perfect opportunity to use, or I've got all of these, these dishes that I'm only going to use for guests. And it's like, no, that's not how I want to live. Let me rethink this. So every day is a special occasion, and every day we're going to use these glasses, and I'm not going to have the separate. And it's just like, you start rethinking the importance, that one, the same thing. I wear a couple of necklaces every day, and this lady as well. Why do you? A young girl asked me. She was like, "Why do you wear all of your jewelry?" It's like, if I have to pick a day, I love all of my jewelry. I want to wear it right now, every day. And so I think about things differently in that manner, because every day is that day that you need to be focused on being free.
That's right. Thanks for that super chat, Simona. Simona says, "Live the life you want, Black excellence, and not the kind that kills you." Because I always say Black excellence is killing Black women, right?
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
take
Absolutely.
take
Thank you,
take
Simona.
take whatever you want. Plan, implement. We have options. Thank you, Simona. Yeah, we do have options. I'm so glad to have you guys here with us today.
We do. We do.
Yes. All right. So you're in your beautiful home. You're parked a place that you feel safe and comfortable.
Right.
So
Yeah.
when's your next trip, and when am I coming to house sit?
You are welcome to come. I'm in the recoup right now.
Yeah.
I I'm tapped out because one of the things, another question that you had was, what's the surprises? So no matter how well you think you're planning with building, costs are going to be different than what
Oh
you
yeah.
initially planned for. And right now, lumber and contractor costs, everything is out of the roof. Like what I paid for lumber with the new space that I added, it's probably about 10 times more what I paid in 2015. So I'm in recoup right now in getting my funds back together. But as soon, and it's just like I see it, I see it, I see it. And I'm getting ready to be traveling, and I don't know exactly where I'm going, but I got to go somewhere. I'm ready to see the ocean. I'm ready to travel. I was in Panama early July, and I loved it, but I really couldn't relax because I knew I had so much. Thank you, Sheeta. Thank you. I had so much on my mind of stuff that I needed to do when I got back home.
Uh-huh.
So I want to redo
Yeah.
Panama, and just get back to being free. That to me was part of the reason for building my tiny house, so that I could have that freedom. And I want to get back to my travel. I haven't been back home to Atlanta. The pandemic threw everything off, so I need to get to Atlanta. I just am ready to travel. And you're welcome anytime.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This whole thing was just a setup for me to pitch my services as
You
your
went
house
through a lot. You
and
went
dog
through a
sitter.
lot of changes when you just could say, "Hey, Jewel, when can I come to your house?"
I'm doing it for the people. I'm doing it for us. All right. So as people of the majority, I got to get that into my brain.
And so I did not make it up. I saw somebody on social media say it, and I said, I'm getting ready to say that people of the global majority, because when we think about it, we're not the minority. We are the people of global majority. And that's why those other people are losing their minds,
Yes.
because
Yes.
they are the minority.
And shrinking. That's right. That's right. We get told, especially here in the U.S., we get told that there are these certain indicators of success. I want to go back to Simona's
Oh,
Black
yeah,
excellence comments. Certain
absolutely.
indicators of success, and you've said, you know what? I don't care about the big fancy house. I'm rejecting that. I've said a lot of, I've rejected a lot of things too.
Absolutely.
It's hard. It can be hard for women who have spent a lot of their time trying to achieve these things to then give them up, even when they want to. Do you coach? Are you helping? Do you, when women come to you for coaching or for help with their own tiny house um,
Hmm.
setup
Journey. Hmm.
journey? Thank you. Are they coming already ready, or do they sometimes come to you with that
Not all the
baggage?
time.
Okay.
Not all the time. I hear a lot of people say to me that I'm brave because I was able to choose this life. And what I've realized, so going into this, excuse me, I realized so many people are focused on other people's opinions,
Right.
and what things look like, just like what you said, what it looks like. So the American dream says success looks like the big house and the big cars, and the luxury cars, and the family, and the blah blah blah. But like you said, we're killing ourselves to achieve that. And
Yes.
again, all of that is not set up for us. And so I find that a lot of times, once we focus on self and what it is that we need to be happy, and drown out that extra noise. And I feel like social media is making it even harder for
Yeah.
us when you get on there and you don't even realize subconsciously you're comparing where you are in life and what you have with what you see other people doing. But I that is the thing that we have to focus on, because when I think about in 2013 and 2014, when I was saying I was building a tiny house, so many people, especially in our community, were like, that doesn't sound logical. If I had listened to them, I would have never built my tiny house. But I knew I was building it for me. I knew I had a vision for, this is what I want my life to look like. I knew I had been dreaming about this since my daughter was going into kindergarten, and I didn't let that play into what I was doing. A lot of times we'll let even our families, because that's one of the things in our community where people feel like, sometimes it's pressure from parents or grandparents to, I want you to have better than I
Yes.
had. And so
Yes.
that looks like the big house and the big cars, when really that's sometimes not what we want. And that's a stress. So I feel like it's more of introspection. What is it that I want? What is it that's going to make me happen? And sometimes stepping out and doing something that other people will say to you, is stupid. They'll even say it's stupid, but this is the vision that I have for my life. And then what happens on the backside of that is what we were talking about earlier, where people are like, oh, I didn't realize this was the tiny house she was building. Oh, this makes sense. Where then what people don't understand, they often will attach negative to it.
Right.
And I say all the time, you can't share your dreams and your plans with everybody, even your close friends, and sometimes even with family. If this is what I need to do, this is why I'm doing it, and it makes sense, then you sometimes have to kind of move in silence and do what you're going to do, and not worry about others' perceptions, because you can't live for other people.
No. And sometimes don't share it, right? And find a community of people. Find some
Right.
like-minded people. Find your people. As soon as I
Absolutely.
said school bus, there were
Find your
like 5 or
people.
6 comments in the chat about someone. I'm sorry, I forgot who it was. Someone's already got a school bus, right? Find your people.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yes.
You got to find your people.
You'll be surprised how supportive strangers can be, right? And how much better it can make you feel when you find the community of people who are walking that same path that you're walking. Okay.
Right. They've already blazed the trail in some way, so that you're not reinventing the wheel. You can ask some questions. You can lean on them when you need to. And then, where they can validate, I'm not crazy. This does make sense. And this is something that I've wanted to do. And that was kind of the thing in the beginning, when I was trying to talk to my white counterparts. And I'll always say, when I was trying to be a part of the table, and then I realized I needed to go build my own table.
Yeah.
But I was trying to get them to understand, if you're doing something new and you don't see people involved in it that look like you, and it doesn't even have to be about tiny houses. It could be some hobby. And I've said to them, so you wanted to take up tennis, but you go to, the first meetup and you realize nobody there looks like you. You might not think, that's not for me. Then this isn't something that I should be doing. And so that happens to us oftentimes when we're doing something new, we're doing something different, we're doing something innovative. And our community is like, oh, I don't know about tiny houses. That makes no sense. And before you know it, you will have let them talk you out of, do I belong in this? Is this something that I should be doing? When you need to, latch on and find people who are doing this and think the same way that you do, and will help you move in that direction.
Absolutely. I'm going to stop and acknowledge some more super chats. Thank you very much, Marna Moorfield. Marna says, focusing on self.
Thank you.
I let my age define what level of success I should have right now, and it's killing me. Yeah,
Absolutely.
That. I think everyone can identify with this. Every one of us has at some point said, "Oh, I should have these things," but those are external. Those are external things. We have to decide for ourselves
Validate. Right.
what do I really want?
Right.
Who am I really, and what of these things that I'm chasing after? Which of these things did I actually choose, and which of these things did someone else tell me I need to chase after?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thanks for that super chat, Daisy Lee.
Thank you, Daisy Lee.
Thank you.
Yeah, so many people have a vision of what success should look like. And, society itself has a vision of what success should look like. And success doesn't look like a small house. And, I can't subscribe to that.
Mm-mm. No. Yeah. The feeling of freedom, like just the feeling of you can be anywhere and go anywhere and do whatever you want at any given time is um, underrated, un- underappreciated. Um, it feels so good.
It
As a house
feels
sitter, let me tell you.
it's excellent. It's excellent.
It is. It is. It's something that we just don't get, you know, in here. I don't know. Other countries focus differently on time and work and money. Things have a different balance.
That's one of the things when I travel, and when I first started traveling, and from the American perspective, where you hear so many people say, "Oh, they're so poor and they don't have anything," but then you get to that country, and they are some of the happiest, laid back people, non-stressed people, and you think, I want to live like that.
Yes.
Where it's like they don't have a care in the world
No.
because they aren't striving for some of the things that we say success looks like. So they're not stressed out. They're just doing them. Here I'm fishing. This is dinner tonight. I've got access to all this fresh fruit, and it's just like, okay, so when you bring your American perspective into this, and it's like, no, that's not what happens. They're not poor. They're not, they're not to feel sorry, and
Right.
I'm not saying they have it
Right.
all great. There are some opportunities, but
Struggle.
I'm saying don't take that mindset in and just assume we know so much more and we have it so much better here.
That's right. I went to the Philippines, and I was in the Philippines for maybe 2 months, and one of my stops was a town where a lot of the people's homes were on stilts,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like shanty homes. They were not these were not like elegant homes on. This is not
Mm-hmm.
the Outer
Mm-hmm.
Banks or whatever, but they're homes on stilts. I stayed in one of them. She had like an Airbnb type thing where you could stay. She did not have running water. The shower was a
Mm-hmm.
bucket and a cup, right? When
Mm-hmm.
I tell you that next door neighbor sang karaoke like his life was just a dream. I mean, he would start at about 7 o'clock at night to about 10 p.m. just singing. I mean, he had his own karaoke machine. And
Okay.
like this life
Entertaining
is,
himself.
he was
Life
living
was
life
good.
like it was golden. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Right.
Let's rethink what really is a priority to me. What is really
Right.
important to me? I wanna wake up with a song. I wanna wake up
That
with
lightness.
I want
Absolutely.
Yes, I want to wake up with a song in my heart. Instead, I'm waking up thinking about, oh my gosh, I don't want to go to work. I hate this job, blah, blah, blah.
Right. Right. Right.
Hmm.
Right. And that's why I always say to people, with the big house, and how much time do you get to enjoy your house? Because, how many hours are you working to pay for that house? Do you get to enjoy your family? Those are those are the things. And I feel like the pandemic should have taught a lot of us that we need to refocus
Yes,
on the priorities, because um that was something different, that where we had to reevaluate, what exactly is the priority in life.
that's right. It's hard to decide when you're on the grind, right? When you're on that
Yes.
wheel,
Yes.
when you're grinding, hustling, it's hard you just don't get a chance. So take a break. If we
Absolutely.
recommend take a break, that is when you get clarity on how much of your life is really what you have chosen for yourself. How much of it would you still choose today, knowing
Right.
what you know? So
Right.
Evangelist O3, I saw a couple of questions. Evangelist O3 and someone else, I'm sorry. We talked about this a little bit earlier. So if you're new to the live stream, you're going to want to watch the replay. If you're interested in talking about financing, if you're interested in if you have questions about like the utilities and the setup and all of that, we talked about that earlier. So go back and watch this replay. And also remember that Jewel has information on her sites, MsBohemianSoul.com and Tiny.
Tiny House Trailblazers.
Thank you. I'm going to link to this again. Okay. All right. Yes, I want. Yes, Kathy. Like, I think about that man a lot. I think about him a lot because when I say the house is on stilts, I don't know any better way to say it, but that it was a shanty
Mm-hmm.
house,
Mm-hmm.
and you walked, maybe almost a quarter of a mile down to get to the road, to get off of the
Okay.
water from where I stayed.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And one lady sold toothbrushes, toothpaste, soap, right, toiletries out of the front of her
Okay.
house. You go a few
Okay.
more houses, someone is selling bottled sodas and water. And you go, right, like this is their little, they get a little money. Everybody in the neighborhood comes there to buy their soap. And then everybody goes to the next house to buy their. So they're getting a few
Mm-hmm.
dollars a day. But when I tell you the karaoke was was popping,
Yeah.
he was singing, he was
Yeah.
living. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to link to Tiny House Workshops. This is the link is specifically for the Tiny House Workshops that Jewel runs, and then I'm going to link one more time
Thank
to
you.
Consultation. You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, so I feel like, I don't know. So friends, if you have questions that I have not asked, you need to ask them now, because I feel like we've nailed this. We have covered this, right? We've talked about why you chose tiny house living. We talked about money, right? What's the money difference and what does that mean in your life? You told us about the surprises. We talked about being a Black woman in a tiny home and in tiny home communities. And we actually talked about communities that are springing up and how you can find these communities. And we talked about how to know. Well, I guess, is there a type of person that you sometimes run across who you're like, this is not going to work for you? Do you?
um, early it's early on. So I always say tiny house living currently, especially on the East Coast. Tiny house living, I say, is not necessarily for the faint of heart. Because one of the things that I have to know is my house is kind of in a gray area in that it's not illegal, it's not necessarily legal. And so, like living in the backyard in the city of Charlotte, I lived there successfully for a little over 2 years, but I always knew there was an opportunity that I was going to have to move my house.
Right.
And so so that was just something that I knew. Again, I've said that I've been very successful with Craigslist and, word of mouth and connecting. So I always knew, and even when I built my house and not knowing as I was building the location that I would be going to, I always trust the process and know that things are going to work out as they're supposed to.
Yes.
And so that, while I won't say it's not stressful, I do know that it's going to work out. That's not an option for everybody.
Right.
Sometimes people need to know exactly where they're going, and I don't want to have any problems. And so unless that person is going into a specific tiny house community or, they have their own property, I would say to that person, this probably isn't the right fit for you right now until, legalization is more of an opportunity. So that mindset is one of the things that I know, that's not going to work for that person. And I also, somebody who isn't able to kind of downsize, because obviously it's going to take some downsizing. Somebody who can't see that and wants to still have that same lifestyle and mentality, I always say, then tiny house living is likely not for you. But for the most, the people that will reach out to me, they've kind of already stepped through all of that. The challenge that I see most is for somebody who's trying to, they want some, and I don't necessarily want to use the word stability, but they are, a couple of years too early in this as we're still working to legalize it in different areas. And so that it might not be an option for them unless they're willing to go to some of the established communities.
Yes. All right. So Sojourner wants to know what your favorite features are of your tiny home. According to us, the favorite feature is that wall behind you with the art on your wall.
So this is in my new space. What is my favorite feature? I think I would probably have to say my windows. I'm a sunshine person. And when I was saying not knowing how much stuff was going to cost, when I built my tiny house, it was the first time I had built a house and had no idea how much windows cost. And so that was a big chunk into my budget. Thinking inside my tiny house, I have 17 windows. I always forget how many windows I have in the tiny house. And in this new space I built, I have 10 windows out here. So I would probably say my windows. I love sunshine and the open space. So I enjoy having, the windows. And the other thing with when I was building my house, I didn't know where I would end up being able to put it. So I knew that I needed windows all around. So just depending on how I had to situate the house so that I could still have the sunshine and the natural light come in.
Yes. When I posted that we were talking, one of the first comments was like, "Oh, with the house with the round window."
The round window. That has become my signature, my round window. I adore that window.
Yes. Yeah, and your space is very light and airy, but also you have things. Some tiny homes, people have, like we talked about, have gone super
Sparse. Yeah.
minimal, sparse, and
Yeah.
just don't have pretty things in the home. And I love that your home is surrounded by pretty things. The Torah that I watched, you were like, and this is the place for my jewelry, right? My jewelry is out and displayed. I'm not
It,
storing it.
when I'll be 54 next week. I think I'll be 54. Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I've lived in nice spaces, and by the time you're in your 50s, you know yourself, or like you know yourself, and you know the things that you have to make home. And so for me, I didn't want to build something where I had to readjust and try to fit into that space. I needed my space to represent me. And so I've always had my jewelry and my perfume on my bathroom counter. As I was, once I sold my house and I was looking and I rented after I sold my house, looking for an apartment. That was one of the things on my list. I had to have nice bathroom counter space because I needed to have my jewelry. I'm a girly girl. I need to have my jewelry, my perfume on the counter. So that went into my design. So that and some of my decor I've had since I've had my house in Atlanta, and where I pared down, these are like my favorite pieces. So I needed to have them in my space in order to make home. And so wanting to make sure I included all of that in my design and had that in my house. One of the things and I knew as I was building my house, I felt like it would appeal to us and appeal to women, because I wasn't building the sparse, all wood, nothing. My house for me is a home, and so it has to represent home. And so, yes, I need to be surrounded with those things that make home for me, that make me happy.
Yes. Purple 75. I can't show you her house. I'm sorry. I can't. But go to her Instagram. Click on the link. You'll go over to her Instagram. You'll see it. You won't lose us. It'll open up in a new window. Ms. Bohemian Soul on Instagram. All right. We've all seen it. We love it. Right. Don't be the only person who hasn't seen her.
Follow me on Instagram. You'll get tired of seeing my house.
No, not possible. Kim J, thank you so much for that super chat.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I'm
I
sorry
did
if
see somebody ask if I had a job.
Okay.
So yes, I do have a job. I actually work for one of the financial institutions, but I will say, I work from home. Even though they're now trying to say we're going to come in the office, I'm not doing that.
Okay.
But and so for me, building my tiny house, and that was one of the reasons it was important for me, because prior to my tiny house, I always had to find the job to make X amount of money to pay for my expenses.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the way I saw this moving forward was I wanted to have my expenses such that I could make decisions on, yes, I want to do that job because I'm interested in it, not because how much are y'all paying?
Mm-hmm.
And so that has been my mindset change. I always joke with one of my girlfriends to say, I've never been able to really quit a job, because you really, they get on your last nerve and you want to stand up on your desk and say, y'all can kiss my butt. I'm out. And then you realize I got to pay this mortgage. I got to do this. I got to sit right here and put up with whatever y'all are doing right now, because I got to pay these bills.
Yes.
But I wanted to be in a position where I could make, like I said, be irresponsible and make decisions differently. And so as they're saying, you all are going to come back, you have to come back into the office, I'm thinking, I'm not coming back in the office. Okay. And I want to, and I can be in a position to say, okay, so I can find another opportunity that doesn't pay as much as I'm currently making because my expenses are such. And I have the freedom to do that because I'm setting my life up that way.
I love that. I love that we don't realize how much our things run our lives, how much of our
Yes,
life is dictated by the fact that we have these things. I have this home,
yes,
this mortgage, this car payment, and that
yes.
dictates what we can and cannot do. Those things are your boss at some
Right.
point. They are the boss of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
I love that you have shifted all of your priorities are in align are aligned with what you really want. Your life is in alignment with your priorities.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Ren, thanks so much for that super chat, friend. All right.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, so and so, what you waiting on? I'm telling you, go on over. Go on over. I'll put you on the spot.
Thank you, so and so.
Do you have any plans to do more YouTube videos? Are you done with YouTube?
I need to get my whole social media act together so that it's coming. I don't do very well, but yes, but with this renovation, I will be updating my out my photo gallery because I haven't done that. I do want to do a new video tour of my house because people are asking. And I have on my to-do list that I want to put together a coffee table book. So I want to do all of that and so it's going to require me to get it all together. So it's coming, I promise.
Wonderful. I would love to. I would love a coffee table book. I don't even
Oh,
have a
thank
coffee
you.
table.
Thank you.
I'm such a fan of coffee table books. For
I
my birthday,
love them.
I love them. My birthday was July 5, and I gave away a coffee table book because it didn't make sense for me to buy one. Right?
Okay.
I'm a house sitter, so I gave away. Vintage Black Glamour has a beautiful coffee table book of vintage black glamour.
Look, you see me making a note.
Yes,
Okay.
Nichelle Gaynor. Yes,
Okay, let me look
yeah,
that up. I love beautiful coffee table books,
yes.
especially in Beautiful Us. So thank you.
I would love to see that. We would. We all agree. We all agree.
Thank
All right.
you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, friends. So we now know where to go to. Also, we know where to go if we want to get involved in creating a community. I'm really heartened to hear that there are communities of Black farmers and Black tiny house owners coming together to make safe spaces
Trying
for.
to make that happen. So one of the things I always mention, your question of who this movement isn't for is another question that I'm thinking about. So where I was saying, I know I might have to move my house because I exist in a gray area.
Mhm.
um, that's the same conversation that I have as I'm trying to do, as somebody said, this tiny house matchmaking.
Mhm.
That once we once we go and ask for permission, that's oftentimes when somebody says no, you can't do that.
Right.
And so a lot of this conversation is, you do your vetting, but a lot of this is just deciding that we're going to do this.
Okay.
I'm not out advertising it. I'm not
Mhm.
going to ask for permission. I'm going to set this up so that it works for me. And this is, kind of like my business.
Yeah.
And so for the person who's not comfortable with that, then that might not be something that they would want to consider. So
Yes.
when I go into like here at the farm, I actually, I work out having a rental agreement with the property owner. So I'm
Mhm.
not saying, it's all a handshake. We're going to do all of this by word of mouth. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying, put all of that in place. But what I'm saying is don't necessarily go and ask the city or the county for
Right.
permission. Sometimes because my counterparts who are being successful doing this, they're not asking permission.
No.
They've already got property. They're doing this, they're doing it off the radar. And then they might go back later because they've already got it established and work with the city, but they're not asking for upfront permission and we're so used to, having to ask because we do have to ask.
Yeah.
But a lot of times there are some times where, we can just, if it's not all out in the open, then kind of, set it up and do it and make it work.
Mm. Have you heard of any cities or any places that have been very open to and have worked with tiny house communities, or are we just not there yet?
So there, like I said, the West Coast. So there are
Okay.
numbers of cities in California that allow tiny houses as accessory dwelling units, which is what I was doing, living in that person's backyard.
Oh,
So there are several cities in California who have said, yes, we'll do that because they recognize all. I was reading an article earlier, or one day last week, that said there is nowhere in the United States where someone who is making minimum wage can afford an apartment.
no,
That's absolutely crazy.
that's right.
We've got an affordable housing crisis, which I'm not saying tiny houses are the answer for that, but they're an opportunity.
And
And so California recognizes that, and they're allowing tiny houses to be used in that manner. And so they are, blazing the trails and making it happen. In Texas, there are some areas that are open to tiny houses. And then there are pockets of communities throughout the country. There are a couple of tiny house communities here, even in North Carolina. Most of them are kind of towards the mountain areas, but there's some, I think, in around the Raleigh-Durham area. So there are pockets where it's happening. Most of the communities, again, are communities of our counterparts. So where you still have to go in and do your due diligence and make sure it's the right community for us. And then there are a couple of spots where I know Black people are kind of living in community. They're just not advertising it because we don't have the luxury to advertise, everything that we're doing.
no. All right. Okay. Thanks, friends, for the super chats. So if we're having internet problems, I'm sorry. I can't fix it. But if it's on your end, just try it like the information, like she says, try to come out and come back in. I can see Jewel, and so I think we're okay. So if you're having problems on
Okay.
your end, you may need to exit out and come back in. But I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you very much. You guys have been very generous with these super chats, so thank you for that.
Thank you
I
so much.
I appreciate you being here, friends, all of you. I appreciate you being here and participating. I appreciate you being
Thank
very
you,
generous with
Doris.
our guest.
Thank
And I
you.
appreciate you in the chat
That was
answering.
unexpected. I
Yes.
appreciate that.
Surprise. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And I appreciate you guys being generous and answering questions that I couldn't get to, right? If you've had questions that weren't answered and you came late, they probably were answered earlier because we talked about the logistical stuff very early. So go back there and look at those things. Okay. And to you, Jewel, thank you. We
Absolutely. Thank you.
we appreciate you. We appreciate you taking your time and coming to talk about this thing, but we appreciate the work that you're doing. I
Thank you.
know that it would be easier for you to just keep it quiet, keep everything to yourself, live your dream in your tiny home, and never share with other people how you did it and how they can do it and what struggles you've had. And it would be easier, right? So I appreciate that you're taking that you're doing this for us. I know we
Thank
see you're
you.
doing this for us, so thank you.
Thank you. When when my episode first aired on HGTV, this older lady reached out to me and she said, "You are the Harriet Tubman of tiny houses."
Yes, yes,
And and so it's like, okay, I know I haven't definitely not comparing myself to Harriet. We know Harriet saved all of us. But just her when she was saying, you're blazing a trail and it became a responsibility. And as I realized my counterparts weren't trying to include us, I was like, okay, I got a job here, and I've I didn't sign up for it, but it has been something. When I get a note from somebody, and I've gotten a couple of notes who said, until I've gotten a few notes, until I saw you, I didn't feel like this movement was for us.
that's right.
And those are the things that say, okay, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
And so I'm on the right track.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you
hope
very
that you
much.
do take some time though and rest, right? Take some time that is not for anyone else, only for you. Enjoy
I'm
that
working
freedom
on
that
that.
you've set your life, that you've set yourself up for. Enjoy it. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for the conversation. Thank you for the super chat. Like I said, that was a unexpected bonus, and I so appreciate it. This has
Yeah.
been. I have enjoyed talking to my sisters first thing in the morning. I really appreciate this. I needed this.
Great. Thank you. We needed it. Thank you. I'm gonna DM you to get your Cash App. Okay. All
Okay.
right. All right. Thank you so much, friends. Next week, I don't know. So I don't know. Next week, I don't remember. So, but if you're new here, we get together every Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern time to talk about things. Okay. That's it. All right. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you all
Thank
again. And
you.
Jewel, thank you. This was so wonderful.
Thank you. It was the same for me. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.